It's your favorite boys and lady.
Yeah.
I'm a favorite boy.
Well,
Wow.
You're somebody's favorite boy. You're my
thanks.
favorite boy.
Aw.
Welcome back to It Builds Character. It's been a while since we had one of these, right?
Yeah, and now there's 3 of us.
Yeah.
We're just adding on characters.
Yeah.
It's just multiplied.
Slowly but surely, Hijack will assemble
Yeah.
and cause the apocalypse. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And in this episode of It Builds Character, we are going to talk about character flaws.
Oh my god.
Oh no, that dirty thing.
Joseph, what
important.
is the character flaw?
A character flaw is something negative or undesirable about a character that shows a character is not perfect. Now, the reason you want to give your characters flaws instead of just having them be perfect at everything is because that makes them feel more real, and it makes them, feel like a real person. It makes them more interesting. And there's a lot of things that can come through from having a character flaw that can cause, giving them a character arc. That's something that leads them to grow into a more developed person, a more developed character. You probably hear that term a lot.
Yeah.
And that usually means that they went through some hardships as a result of their flaws. If you don't give your character flaws, it can result in them being really flat and uninteresting.
Like me.
No.
Damn. Wow, it
That's
roasts
self-roast.
Hey.
Damn.
No, I'm fine.
To make it an actual flaw, it has to result in something negative, because there are a few times that some people write their flaws and they're not real flaws because they don't really affect the character. Instead, it's resulting in a trait. Now, there are instances where you can make a character without flaws and make them interesting and likable.
Yes.
But we're not here to talk about that.
No, that can be saved for another episode.
Yeah.
Would be
Because,
exciting too.
Ian, as you
Yeah.
pointed out, there are several characters in WoW that don't have flaws, but they're still pretty awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Like
Such as Uther,
Uther.
the Lightbringer. Such a cool character, but entirely flawless.
Oh yeah, he's flawless. He's a flawless man. He's a beautiful man.
so great.
And if anybody
Look at that beard.
anybody says anything bad about him, I will go over there and call them a big doo-doo head.
Indeed.
Great.
So, what are some characters that are poorly written as a result of not having any flaws, Caitlin?
Well, golly gee, am I glad you asked that question. So aside from everyone's favorite choice of Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way from the god tier fanfiction My Immortal, there is Bella Swan from the Twilight series.
What?
I know, it's not shocking at all. She's basically the poster child of bad, flawless characters. So she's, in the books, the protagonist and the narrator, and she, is presented without any real flaws, or, honestly, any defining personality traits. She is bland. To quote, I think Bob's Burgers, if she was a spice, she'd be flour. So she is considered all around really average in universe, but almost immediately she gets the attention of Edward Cullen because she apparently has a wildly appealing scent, and he's like, gotta have that blood. And then classmates just kind of flock to her for no real reason, especially considering that in the books, she always thinks of them super dismissively and oh, they're all shallow and everything. It's homegirl, just be grateful that you're new in town and someone wants to sit with you at lunch. Anyway.
It's really interesting because that could have been a flaw of hers, that she thinks down on people and then, she gets her comeuppance as a result of,
Yeah.
But that doesn't come up in the story, does it?
It sure does not.
No, she's just I'm better than all of you, but then nothing really happens with that.
Yeah, it's not even that she has a superiority complex, because that would actually be interesting. It's just that oh, they're all fake, but I'll still hang around with them. It's okay, Bella, you do you. So the inexplicable in-universe likability kind of gets into Mary Sue territory, or Mary-tory, as I like to call it. You're welcome. But a lot of the Mary Sue qualities stem from a lack of real flaws, so it kind of ties together. Bella's only real flaw in universe, if it can even be called that, is that she's apparently really clumsy, but it never really negatively impacts her, and it doesn't actually come up all that often. I think it might have been mentioned once or twice in the first book, and then it never became an issue again.
Really?
And then in the last book, the clumsiness is just completely gone because vampires.
Great.
Yeah, to quote you, Joseph, she's really pants.
Oh yeah, you wear her like pants.
Yeah, someone who doesn't have any real personality, who mainly exists for the audience to place themselves into the story through.
Oh, good.
She's very pants.
Good assessment.
She's khaki pants, according to all those posts I see about Stephanie Meyer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ian, what is another character that suffers as a result of not having any flaws?
Yeah, Ian.
Well, I am a massive nerd, and so I'm pulling from World of Warcraft as
As is
fun,
crazy.
as is my usual thing. So, in World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor, the best expansion, obviously.
Everybody loves.
Everyone loves it. There was no content, so you can just sit there and
What are you
just
talking
waste
about? Don't
time.
you love being in your garrison?
Anyway, in WAD, as it was known as, Yrel, which was the primary Alliance NPC, she was a Draenei, she was basically flawless as well. Throughout the expansion, you basically helped her out with all of these different quests, which were her going around and being praised for her devotion to the light, and her being like a symbol of peace, and how she's a great leader, and all of these things. And she just gets more and more of that throughout the entire questline experience. And every zone that she's in, it's just like, oh, yes, Yrel, it is so good that you're here. We need your help. And it's just like, okay, so hero thing is happening right here. She's the main character and not you, which is really interesting in a video game, just generally.
There's actually
it
it's
could
kinda,
be good,
It's
but
kind of similar in Fire Emblem Awakening because it was basically like Chrom was the main character and you were his assistant. So like every battle you had to have Chrom. Like all the cinematics were about Chrom pretty much.
yeah. But
So
did
it
Chrom
worked.
have flaws? Did Chrom
He
have
was
a
very
character?
complex.
Ah, there we go. See,
No,
that's
he
the
was
difference.
actually pretty basic, but I married him every time I played. So.
Oh, well.
I
liked him.
I would argue that he does have some minor flaws in there, but I think I would have to do a little bit more research. But for
Anything can change.
But yeah, no, Yrel basically didn't have any flaws. The only flaws that she had, if you could call them that again, were she had a quote-unquote dark secret that the Prophet Velen saw, which never came up. Literally never once in the
Really?
entire gameplay did a
Wow.
dark secret happen. And then that she was maybe vengeful, but that wasn't really a flaw because it was a righteous vengeance. The Iron Horde did really terrible things, and so she was getting justice for it. So in universe, it wasn't really a flaw.
Which, like, vengefulness can work as a flaw, like, if they take it to extremes. Because, like, I guess in the sense that, like, I guess how, let's say you're Jaina, you want to just kind of go at the Horde. Like, if she was super dead set on wiping them out and, like, killing innocent Horde members who hadn't waged any war at all, then I think that would get into more flaw territory. Like,
Yeah.
whenever you drag other people into your own quest for vengeance.
I mean, Jaina did, in fact, have that kind of
Cool.
flaw at one point where
Good
she
for
was
her.
going to literally flood the entire city of Orgrimmar with a giant tidal wave.
But they-
with all of
Less
the...
than ideal.
but they played it off as a flaw, like right?
Yes,
they were like
they
in
did.
universe. They're like,
They were like,
hey,
Like, that's bad.
awful.
yeah,
That's
don't
really
do that.
do that.
Yeah.
So that was like a legit character flaw that
Yeah.
Jaina had after her whole Theramore thing.
I think what's interesting about Yrel, as well as with Bella Swan, is you can see that there's hints of potential of what could be used as flaws. For example, with Yrel, it could be that everyone touts her as this great being and all that, but in reality, maybe she doesn't live up to those expectations. Maybe she becomes arrogant and content with where she's at, and she's like, you know what? Everyone thinks I'm so great. Why do I have to try so hard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could be a thing where and that can give her an arc where like suddenly now she does have to live up to those expectations.
Yeah.
But that doesn't.
But it doesn't happen. No.
No.
Instead, she starts off being like, "Oh, I don't know if I should have all this praise and things," even though again she's doing the whole, this is too good.
Yeah.
And I'm too good for my own good.
Oh, man,
and
when they're
stuff.
too-
and it's
that's-
just like that's not a flaw.
That's frustrating when a character's
Yeah.
way too humble. Like
It's like, okay, yes, sure, whatever. But then she completely grew out of that after the first quest line
Yeah.
with her. And then the thing is, right, is that she continues to be this way to the point where she literally gets, promoted into being the highest ranking member of the Draenei people,
Dope.
a high exarch. And it's like, okay, so what did you do to deserve that? And why do we care? Like, I don't care about your character because you're just kind of there. I didn't hate her ever, but it was just like, oh, yay, here's Yrel. I wonder if she's gonna... Oh, she's saying the light will prevail. Huh. Okay, cool. Now, one thing that changed in Battle for Azeroth was because, they let her go for an expansion. They brought her back, which was like, oh, okay, maybe they did something with her. And you know how I said she was very devoted to the light? they finally decided to give her one flaw, but
Okay.
they went a little bit overboard because they
okay.
made her like a fanatic for the light. Like
right.
literally shoving the light down people's throat, forcibly converting people, doing all these terrible things. It's like that is a 180 of your character.
Yeah.
That is not just putting on a character flaw. That is saying, oh,
That
you're evil now.
Yeah, that's a different character.
That is a different
Yeah.
character altogether. And apparently
Oh.
in universe, like 30 years had passed, but a Draenei lives for like 20,000 or more.
Oh.
So 30 years shouldn't mean anything
Yeah,
to her.
30 years
years
is
is
like a
having-
weekend.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
having a lunch date.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, in 30 years, I've suddenly become a fanatic. It's like
Yeah.
you're going on your lunch date, and they're just like, oh yeah, so here you go. You are now inducted into this terrible religious cult, and
Here,
you have to-
here for lunch, have some light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but like you're just having nice lunch, and she's like, oh, the sandwich is really good. Yeah, I really want to kill everything that's void touched. It's like, what?
What? Yeah.
What?
So yeah, that was
I
the
didn't
thing.
know we
It's
were
like
there.
Yeah.
no flaw from having no flaws to having the most powerful flaw ever, and to where you're not even the same character. Like that's not how you deal with that.
Like, I feel like if they had shown things in game that would explain how she got to that point, it wouldn't have been like such a, I guess, slap in the face. There's a better way to phrase it, but I can't think of it.
Yeah.
But like, if they had shown the development, like even in just little cutscenes or maybe like journal entries that you can pick up or something. But nope.
Yeah.
Not even
Not,
once.
not,
So
not
yeah, characters without flaws, kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of developing flaws, I think what also makes a successful flaw is that if you show those flaws develop early, what makes a character's flaw kind of realistic and understandable is that you understand why they have those flaws in the first place. Because no one has a flaw for no reason. No one's just suddenly a douche, or suddenly they just want to kill everybody,
Except Yrel.
Except Yrel, I guess. But, that's a bad example. It applies more for major flaws because those are very important, and we're going to talk about minor and major flaws later. But it's good to have reasons why the character acts the way they do. You don't always have to reveal them all the time, especially if they're a side character, and if you want to have it revealed over time. But you should have those reasons there somewhere.
Yeah, like the flaws can lead to more tension in the story, and they can lead to like things being uncovered. They can affect relationships between characters.
Conflict is the basis for any plot, and so a flaw can definitely be kind of an introduction to conflict and stuff like that. So like building in conflicts from people's backstories that would have built their own flaws that could then cascade into different conflicts is something that is kind of a cool domino effect of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like just looking into the character's backstory already gives you a lot more to work with, and it helps you flesh out your world more and your characters more.
But what's not Gucci are fake flaws. And these are
What's a fake flaw,
a-
Joseph?
A fake flaw is a flaw that doesn't actually affect the character in any negative way, in which case you would call it a character trait. To make it a flaw, you have to make sure that the character suffers in some way, whether it be in a minor way or a major way. Because whenever you see a character that they tout has a flaw, you see this a lot on DeviantArt characters a lot, whenever they give their little bios, where it's like, oh, well, they don't like this thing, or they hate it when people mistake them for so-and-so race or whatever. Now, the question you need to ask yourself is, does this have an impact on the story? Does this negatively affect the character in any way? And odds are, if the answer is no, then it's not a flaw.
What are some examples of flaws that are easy to sort of fall into the trap?
Oh,
so to
yes.
speak?
A lot of flaws that I see people fall into the trap of throwing it into their characters just because they see other characters have them, but they don't write them as flaws.
Yeah.
Is
Or like in DeviantArt RP groups, like you're usually required to have character
yeah,
flaws.
yeah.
From my days as a 12-year-old DeviantArt person.
Yeah, stubbornness. Stubbornness is one that I
Yeah.
see a lot, where it's like, usually when they say stubbornness, they usually mean they're in the right. To make it a flaw, they have to be stubborn whether they're in the right or in the wrong.
Yeah, like have you ever met a lawyer?
Yeah, a lawyer is lawful neutral. They're not really good or bad. Sometimes they have to advocate for their client, even if they're a criminal.
Yeah, like defense attorneys.
Yeah. So with a flaw, the stubborn character is a flaw when they're too stubborn to be open-minded. The opposite of stubbornness is open-mindedness. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. Maybe they're, I don't know, a racist or something. Racism is the epitome of stubbornness because you don't want to learn about other people.
And the entire South.
Overprotectiveness. That one is more flattering than anything. Whenever someone says overprotectiveness, they usually mean, oh, my character is really good at everything, so they're gonna try and protect everyone because they believe they're really good. And that's really frustrating to see sometimes, because then you're just flattering your character. Same thing with bad temper or ruthlessness. They're usually like, oh, you better not piss them off because they'll kick your ass. It's like, that's not really a flaw. Like, you're just kind of complimenting them some more.
Yeah, I do have kind of an example for a bad temper that I did for a D&D character, which I think I'm doing it okay. I hope so. So I'm in one of my friend's campaigns, I'm playing a paladin. Her name is Lana. And so one of her things is that she has a really bad temper, and she's been working on it. But like, I try to make sure that like her temper gets other people hurt. Like, one thing in her backstory was she saved a family from a group of bandits, but then she was too angry at them to actually run away when she was vastly outnumbered. She tried to swing at one, missed, hit the people's carriage. They had to get away on foot. And then because she refused to run, one of her teammates had to come in and save her, and then he almost got killed for it.
Yeah.
So,
see, that's
that she's now trying to not be as angry, or to get a better hold on her temper.
Yeah. So but that's not to say that these traits can't be flaws, and I'm going to show you how you can turn them into flaws.
Please do.
Yeah.
Enlighten us, Joseph.
Yes, as I read off of this thing. Instead of stubbornness, or not easy to trust, that's another kind of branch, you could make them close-minded, like I said, or undiplomatic. They're unmoving, and even if they're in the wrong, they're just so set that they are in the right.
Yeah, they're a right fighter. Like, they will argue with you for 24 hours that the sky is green.
Yep. And you have to make sure they're in the wrong as well, or else it is not a flaw. Instead of overprotectiveness, think overprotectiveness. Like, they are just like helicoptering over their loved ones all the time, and maybe show, because another thing about that is it can show that they don't really hold the other character's abilities very highly. A good example of that is Marlin from Finding Nemo. He's overprotective of Nemo because he doesn't think Nemo can do anything, and throughout the movie it's proved that Nemo can do stuff, and it's very demeaning, it shows that Marlin's very demeaning, that he looks down on Nemo.
The overprotectiveness, it does come from the fact that his wife and eggs all got eaten by a barracuda.
Yes, and we were talking about that earlier, how they established that early. They should,
like, very first
backstory.
scene.
They show, so that's Pixar's just really good at making really flawed characters that you don't hate because you know why they're flawed, and it ties back, and they have a reason why they're flawed. Instead of bad temper or ruthlessness, just like Kate said, have their bad temper or ruthlessness cause bad things to happen, like Kate's character. She lost her temper and she hurt everybody, and then it's like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Simple rule of thumb is the character must suffer. If they're not suffering, then it's not a flaw.
Make them suffer.
How about you guys read off some fake flaws?
Fake
From our
flaws.
predetermined script.
Alright, so from the predetermined script, one example of fake flaws is a character that's too nice for their own good, and I have personally written a few of these characters when I was a young lad, and even still sometimes today, but, I'm working on it. A lot of the times, these characters kind of show up, but they never really have an effect on, like, the fact that they're too nice for their own good doesn't have an effect on the world around them or the story or any way that that kind of flaw would imply. It's more that a lot of times they'll show up and they're very kind and they're very nice and perhaps they're very trusting, but that doesn't mean that they won't do more than that. Like, they'll still end up like going into being like, oh, we have to take action and stuff, even if they're too nice for their own good, quote unquote. That can get circumvented by making them passive or naive, kind of gullible. That way they are less likely to like actually take action. They're more likely to have action taken upon them. So they'll go over and be like, oh, I'm too nice for own good, so I'm gonna go over and try to talk this bad guy down and then get destroyed by him because I really couldn't do it. It happens because maybe the bad guy is just really not caring.
But people don't want to write that.
But people don't want to write that. They don't want to.
They don't want to commit.
They're pleasant, kind lad to getting destroyed.
I mean, that's really
My sweet boy.
Yeah, that's really the biggest rule of thumb is you got to commit. You can't hold back whenever you write these flaws. You got to go all the way.
Definitely the thing.
Yeah.
Holding back just, diminishes what the character could achieve later on. What growth could be there.
Oh, this one. What's this next one?
Oh,
Kate?
let's read it off. So one brought it up briefly talking about Bella Swan, but it's a character who's super clumsy. So like more often than not, it's kind of a cute klutzy thing. Like pretty like the trope like meet cute, where they like the anime protagonist bumps into the love interest and it's like, oh, it's so cute, and then like they trip over things or bump into stuff and like they don't actually have consequences. Like instead it just makes them more endearing. And like that's not to say that clumsiness can't make a character endearing and like you shouldn't do it, but it's not a flaw if that's like all it does. Like if you want it to be a flaw, it's important to show how it negatively impacts them and other people. Like maybe they drop something and they break it and it's super important and it's somebody else's, or maybe they trip and then like this is more in a fantasy setting, but maybe they trip and activate some sort of dungeon trap that everyone else has to deal with. Basically have their clumsiness like directly lead to them or their companions like suffering for it. Like maybe someone gets hurt, or maybe it delays them for a really long time when time is really of the essence.
But then that means they have to learn to not be clumsy anymore.
Oh, poor baby.
I mean, truth be told, Alumdurai did have this kind of clumsy, the base clumsy, not the full flaw clumsy, where, he's clumsy because it's kind of a funny trait for him. He's too tall to get into things, so he never realizes that he's going to bonk his head on the rafters, or he'll fall over because of a large gust of wind. But even still, like, I do use that more for the comedy in Alumdurai, that way he lightens up as a character. Yeah. But, there are ways that, even though it might not be used as one of his big flaws, he has other flaws, that it does kind of still build his character slightly.
It builds character.
Whoa! Hey, that's the name of the show.
Yeah. That nice little title drop. Yeah. So there was the third one, and that's loner characters.
That one's very common.
Yeah. So this sort of flaw is more like an issue in RPGs where you're collaborating with other people to tell a story. But it definitely does come into play in other media. Like loner characters, like purposefully, they don't interact with any of the group members in any meaningful way, and they have this sort of like flippant disregard for other people, and it rarely adversely affects them in universe. Like, they still get to participate in plot-relevant events, they don't really suffer any major social drawbacks from it, and they, like, are often inexplicably likable in universe despite how aloof they are. One of my players in another campaign was like this.
Are they like, oh, how come you guys don't want to learn about my character?
Not even that.
Oh, okay.
Nope, I love the player, but I do not like the character.
Yeah.
Like, he would always say, I go sleep in a tree. Or, as soon as we get into the city, I go off to the slums and play with the children. It's like, why don't you talk to your teammates? Like, my players had an in-character intervention for them. Generally, I would highly discourage doing loner characters in RPGs because it doesn't mesh well with other people. But, if you really want to do it, like, it's best to work with it, like, in a non-collaborative story, or depending on how you go about it, it could work in something like D&D. Like, if you really want it to be a flaw and you really want them to be a loner, then, like, have it tangibly affect their reputation. Like, have people be unwilling to talk to them, or maybe they keep information from them. Maybe they spread rumors and ruin their reputation even more. Maybe people are unwilling to team up with them whenever they need help. I guess most importantly, have people just not immediately like them right off the bat for no good reason.
You mean have them suffer as a result for their lonesomeness?
That. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Or then maybe they have to work to convince people that they're a better person than their like super solitary nature would have them initially believe. And like the most important thing is make sure you justify it. Like humans are naturally social creatures. Like we need other people to live and develop. So why is this one person so against it?
An example that I have, because I've been recently rewatching Dragon Ball and all that, is Tien Shinhan. He starts off as a kind of loner character. He becomes a less of a loner character throughout the story as he works with like Goku and Yamcha and Krillin and them, but then he returns to his kind of loner nature later on, and he does kind of suffer from it, because what he does is he believes he can get stronger by himself. He doesn't need other people to help him, so he'll go off and train on his own, and then he'll come back and be like, I'm more powerful than I was before, and turns out that everyone else who was training with everyone else did kind of get stronger than he did at a different rate, because even though he's a very good martial artist and able to train himself because he knows what he needs, it's still kind of holding him back in a way. And he keeps on falling back into that, because as he continues to do that, he then ends up feeling further and further behind from Goku specifically, because Goku is, becomes a Super Saiyan at some point, and it's just like, oh, okay, how the heck am I supposed to do that? Well, I'm not going to be able to train with these guys anymore because they're just going to destroy me, so I'm just going to go and keep training with myself. So it becomes a vicious cycle for him. And eventually, he does have his moments where he'll come back and join the group, and it works then, and people are like, hey, are you okay? A lot of the times, because people do kind of worry about him, but he's also like, I'm fine, I'm Tien.
But with that,
Cool,
he still has a reason why he's, lonesome, just like Kate said. We are inherently social, we don't just automatically, out of the womb decide, I'm gonna be alone.
Like, even introverts, like, you've got your few close friends that, like, you need human contact, even if it's just for, like, 10 minutes once a day.
Yeah, or like a dog or a cat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, Tien does have Chaozu, which is his, like, friend. I don't exactly know what their relationship is, but like they're basically brothers, and Chaozu does go with him on a lot of his loner things, but it's always just those two, and
even
when Chaozu's dead, he's really sad and off on his own again.
Even the great detective himself, Batman, even though he's a loner, he does want companionship. A lot of people don't know that. It's just that he feels like he can't have it because, he worries that if he makes any more companions, that he will lose them just like he loses his parents, That's what, so he's a loner out of circumstance, not because he wants to,
Yeah.
He's just like, I don't want to hurt anymore.
It reminds me of one clip from, I think it was one of the Justice League animated series, where Wonder Woman was like trying to see if he would, like, if they'd go on a date.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, Batman doesn't date. And she was like, oh, is it because of all these things? And it's like, no, it's because I don't want to, like, have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that, someone I could care about.
Which makes him perfect for Wonder Woman, because he doesn't have to worry about Wonder Woman, because she's freaking Wonder Woman.
Yeah, but he still has that, even still, with Wonder Woman.
Like he said, he is lots of people don't realize, but Batman is, and Batman knows that he is emotionally unstable. He is, he is not okay.
Yeah.
Most of the Batman characters. Anyway, generally, it's easy to start with two main kinds of flaws. They can be categorized in two different versions. There are the minor flaws and the major flaws, and I personally, in my honest opinion, believe that every good character with flaws has these two things, at least one of them.
Yeah.
So, Ian, what is a minor flaw?
What's a minor flaw? Well, a minor flaw is something that's undesirable, It doesn't really have much of an effect on the character, and it would just kind of be something that they have and they deal with, but it doesn't pose a massive problem in their lives. Even though it might be a minor flaw, it does still have to have some, reasoning behind it. You can't be like, oh, it's a minor flaw that they're clumsy. But like, why are they clumsy? So it's because they have literally two left feet. So that's pretty hard to walk with two left feet. So it's something that that, I don't know, maybe that would get to being major at that point. But either way, these kind of minor flaws can have these gradual developments that start as something small and then grow to be more significant throughout their life. And also, even though they might be small, they still have to have the suffering. There has to be the character suffering, or like we've said several times, it's not a flaw. One of the things that you need to remember when writing a minor flaw is to avoid dissonance within the character or within the world. If someone is called out to be an arrogant jerk, like Sherlock Holmes, he's a big jerk throughout all of his iterations.
Yeah.
No one has ever said that he's not a jerk. But it's still a minor flaw because it never really affects his ability to solve the mysteries or anything. He's still a good detective, even though he's a jerk.
But it's never pushed to the side.
It's never pushed aside.
Yeah. Watson is sure to say, hey, Sherlock, you're kind of being an ass right now. And Sherlock's like, I don't care.
Yeah, and people might be like, oh, I don't really want to work with you, and it's just like, well, that's too bad because I'm gonna work with you and I'm gonna have this solved because he's Sherlock and he's curious as to solving the crimes. He might not. He probably has some level of care for the actual, figuring out what's going on for the people, but mostly he wants to figure it out because he's Sherlock Holmes and wants to figure things out. Yeah. And the thing is with minor flaws is that you can kind of give your characters more than one. These can be stacked. These can be meshed together, that all can have these kind of interconnectedness to where, one minor flaw can play into another one of their minor flaws. So maybe, they're clumsy, and then they also, because of their clumsiness, they have kind of nervousness when they go and try to hold,
and that just makes it worse.
Which then makes it worse.
Yeah.
Which then, it kind of spirals out of control from there. But yeah, you can just keep on adding, don't just pile on flaws until they're just like the most flawed character, because that also kind of loops back into, then they're really bland because they have every flaw in existence. But, if you kind of put in enough to where it makes sense and that they kind of go together, then it can really make the character grow through their different struggles that they have with the minor flaws.
Yeah, make them sweet and spicy.
Yeah. And of course, the bigger one, the one that causes character arcs and sometimes entire stories, is the major flaw.
Sometimes known as a fatal flaw.
Yeah, fatal flaw.
Fatality.
Because it can result in their doom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is a major flaw, Caitlin?
Okay, so a major flaw is something crippling that a character either has to overcome or it's going to be their downfall or somebody else's downfall. And again, to be a flaw, they have to suffer for it. It could result in the character growing or learning a lesson. That can be a whole big thing for making a character arc. Given enough tweaking, a minor flaw can develop into a major flaw, and vice versa. This can keep the character, changing and growing, and it keeps them interesting. And again, don't overdo it, but don't not do it. Unless you intend on the character being at the end of their growth, and then you don't plan on making them a main character anymore. They reach the end of their arc and then they retire.
They can become a character that is fully developed and they don't have any flaws anymore, but at that point then the story shouldn't really be about them, because they're not, their interest comes from the fact that they've already finished their hardships.
Yeah, that's kind of the point where a PC becomes an NPC.
Yeah. I mean, kind of taking that and using one of my own characters. Again, I play a lot of World of Warcraft, and so my main character in World of Warcraft, his name's Adeus Lytrin. And he started out as kind of a very Mary Sue character, but as I grew him, he definitely gained his flaws and his different problems. And throughout the different expansions and throughout me role-playing him, he had his character arc, and it ended at the end of Legion. And so he is now supposed to be, although gameplay-wise it doesn't take effect, he's retired. He no longer is taking part in all the big fights and stuff. And so I've shifted my focus for the RP of the characters into his son, who is much more he's in the midst of his arc, and all the stuff that's going on with him is kind of thing. So yeah, in my own headcanon World of Warcraft characters, he is now the NPC, and his son is now my player that I'm kind of focusing on.
Yeah, and in a campaign I'm running for my roommates, there's an NPC that specifically is a level 20 druid, but she's retired. So she used to be a PC and then got all the strength that she needed. She's fully developed now, so she's not the focus anymore.
Yeah.
Dang.
So now that we've established what makes good flaws or bad flaws or whatever, then what are some examples of flaws that are easy to write that we can start with our character? Let's say I'm a new writer on the block, and I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to show Bobby McFarmerson, the buff farmer from down south, and he's so awesome, but people keep saying that he's a Mary Sue because he doesn't have any flaws. What are some flaws that I could possibly give this character that don't take a genius to write about?
Well, hot diggity, I am glad you asked, Joseph. So one big thing that I don't actually see very much, but I think is a really cool flaw to implement, is cowardice. I think it's really easy to implement because you can do it with varying degrees of intensity. Depending on how much and how strongly the character fears things, it could either be a major flaw or a minor one. For a minor one, maybe it's like a specific phobia, like spiders or water, and then that like presents a problem in really specific situations that they have to deal with. Like if they have to swim across a lake to get somewhere, or in Skyrim whenever they want to go in a cave, but there's a giant spider waiting at the ceiling, so they waste 20 minutes not wanting to go inside.
That sounds very specific.
No, it's not. Or maybe they're afraid of everything that could even possibly get them hurt, and maybe they always run away from problems, and they leave people behind, or they let antagonists like get the upper hand, which is no bueno.
Yeah.
So the origins of the flaw can really help you dig into your character's backstory, since it's usually pretty specific. So like if your character has a fear of water, maybe in the past they nearly drowned at a young age, or maybe they were on a ship that sank, or lost a loved one in like a flood or a storm or something like that. A character that's afraid of literally everything can be a little bit harder to like implement a specific past event for, because it might be the case that they're just naturally cowardly and they just never had any experience that forced them to overcome it. Or maybe like the character lived a life constantly on the run. Maybe they always lost people that were close to them. They kept dealing with terrible enemies or events, kept having to flee from danger instead of dealing with it because they were too weak or they were unprepared. And if you really want to highlight the character's cowardice, a good thing to do, like honestly in like either solo projects or in collaborative games, is to like contrast them with another character who's had similar life experiences, but they dealt with them differently. Maybe that character is strong and hopeful and brave.
Like a mentor.
Yeah, or maybe they're hardened and cynical and they're like, I'm not scared of anything. The world is cruel. Grow up. Which lends itself to its own flaw, but that's, yeah. Maybe they're not fazed by anything. And that's another thing, like fearlessness can be a flaw. Like there's a difference between bravery and fearlessness. Like bravery is like, okay, I'm really scared of those spiders, but I gotta get past this goddamn cave, so I'm gonna kill them. Fearlessness is like, I don't care about these spiders, they can bite me all they want, I might die, that's fine, I don't care. Fearlessness is what gets you killed.
Because at that point, like, it's not fear, like, because if you have no fear, like, it's not, people like to say, oh, you're so brave for doing that thing, but if they weren't scared of in the first place, then, it's not bravery, it's just, they're just doing stuff.
Yeah.
Or it's just stupid.
Or it's stupid, yeah. There's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, I'm not afraid of walking through that fire, even though it could burn me alive. It's like
you should be.
That's not brave. I mean, that is brave, but it's not brave. It's just fearless.
Like it'd be brave if you're walking through it for a specific end, like maybe you're going to rescue something.
Yeah.
But like if you're just doing it, like it's like, no, I don't care if I get burned. Then it's like, okay, dipshit, whatever. So as a minor flaw for cowardice, I think specific phobia works best. Like the character's phobia can lead to inconvenience for themselves or any companions that they have. Like if they're afraid of water and they come upon a lake that they all have to cross, then either that character is going to be forced to face their fear head on, which can lead to some character development, or they spend extra time trying to find a way to cross, whether it's like trying to find a way around or put together some sort of floaty thing. And if they're with other people, the companions are going to be slowed down by trying to accommodate them, because they're going to have to work around this person, which can lead to arguments or wasted time, or it forces the character to cross, they force the character to cross the water, which will not be fun for the character in question, and that's going to lead to some pretty intense conversations and feelings after the fact.
I don't remember what movie or show or whatever where a character has to like go through the water, but the other character is afraid of getting wet, so they're just like, the character's walking through the water and it comes up to their shoulders, and then the character that's afraid of the water is like hanging onto their face and then like covering them. They're like, quick, go get them, they're getting away, but it's like, I can't see, you're covering my face.
Yeah.
That's a funny little thing.
Yeah. And then as a major flaw, I find that like all-encompassing cowardice works best, but like specific phobias that are really intense can work well too. So the character is always going to want, or they're always going to try to run away. They never deal with threats or problems that come up, no matter how much they need to be dealt with. Like the consequences of intense cowardice are like usually best explored in the presence of other characters, I think. Because like, a coward is more likely to leave their friends behind to save their own skin, which then can lead to questions of that character's morality, or their bonds, or maybe the coward gets left behind by the companions, who've just gotten tired of how unwilling they are to, not even just face their fears on their own, but like let their companions help them deal with it, because that's frustrating. And this can be super, super spicy if the coward is like basically the key to dealing with whatever problem. Like if you're dealing with a bunch of undead and the coward is a cleric, and like you literally just need them to turn undead for like 2 seconds, but they won't. Then like they're the key to dealing with it, but they just can't because they're too afraid. That can be real spicy.
Yeah.
An interesting character that has this flaw, which is it's really interesting when you think about it, is Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, Courage is actually, like he has this flaw, but like it's really interesting because like he does work through it all the time, and
that's kind of made like the basic story arc for any Courage the Cowardly Dog episode is Courage sees a scary thing. Courage is very scared of it and doesn't know how to deal with it. Courage figures out that he has to deal with it, and then he kind of deals with it.
Yeah.
And so it's like the flaw is constantly there with his cowardice, but he constantly finds ways to work through it in some way. And so it's a kind of a weird mix of both a minor and a major flaw because like it is always there, ever present with his his life as a dog.
Yeah.
But
his wonderful dog life.
his wonderful
and
dog
we can-
lives in the middle of nowhere.
I think we could talk about that in the future too, about having like things like certain flaws, like they learn to deal with them but never get over them.
Yeah.
I remember a while back I sent you something about like Harley Quinn, how Harley Quinn always has, the Joker there, like that trauma's always with her, but she learns to overcome it, but it will never completely go away. That's a topic for another video.
Yeah. Real life example to anyone dealing with social anxiety.
Oh yeah.
What's another one, Joseph?
Another one that's very easy to write, and you see it a lot in media nowadays, is pride or arrogance. An arrogant character. There are arrogant characters everywhere. That's why I think this is so easy to write, is because you can see these examples everywhere. A character can get into people's business, they could just kind of butt in all the time. They're like, hey, no, here, let me do that, like all the time, and that can get a little bit annoying in universe. They believe that they're the best, and that can cause a lot of arguments in universe as well. If, say, there's another experienced character and they're like, no, we have to do it my way. That can cause a lot of tension. The origins can be either because their trust is broken, because how can they trust somebody else if someone in the past that they trusted, broke that trust? And they're like, okay, you know what? If nobody can do it right, then I have to be the one to do it right, and then that can be the origin of their arrogance. Or say that everything's just kind of worked out for them. Like, why do they have to do what other people say if everything they've done is just kind of been okay,
Or if that maybe like they're from like, if their upbringing was like super prestigious, they're all very high and mighty.
Yeah, I was just about to say, a lot of richness and arrogance go pretty well together, because if you're really rich, you come from a rich family, you're like, okay, well, but I couldn't do anything wrong, my family's not done anything wrong, everything I've done so far seems to be pretty alright, how could I do anything wrong?
Yeah.
This character usually butts heads with other characters that can also be arrogant, or just like well-meaning characters, oftentimes the arrogant character butts heads with someone just as smart as they are, but they don't believe they're smart. How could they be? How could they be as smart as I am? They don't know me. As a minor flaw, this can cause their likability to go down the drain, People don't like a big-headed person, If you're just like, no, I'm not gonna take your opinion because my opinion's the best one, or like, my way is the best way. That can be really frustrating to deal with.
My way or the highway.
My way or the highway, yeah.
My way or... Who am I kidding? It's my way. Whatever she says.
Yeah.
What is that
Ash.
from?
Ash.
Oh, Ash.
Yeah.
Overwatch.
That's right. Remember to make it, this goes back to the whole stubbornness thing, it's not something to aspire to. Whenever they plant their feet in this, like, nope, we're not doing it any other way except mine, mine is the best, that is not something that you should aspire to, it shouldn't be something inspiring. And, of course, again, put them in the wrong, make them just be like, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have done it their way. As a major flaw, it's really simple to write it as a major flaw that they can overcome. Basically, have their correct way be the wrong way. It could result in just their plan completely failing. It could result in somebody dying,
like they're vastly overconfident. They think they can take on a legion of villains single-handedly. They get their ass beat, and then they're like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's something to humble the character,
Yeah.
just make them learn, you know what, I'm gonna trust people. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things also with pride is there is also a level of healthy pride that can be, that you can work from a major flaw of pride into becoming a healthy pride as a character trait.
Yeah.
Like
through
just
the
basic
character.
self-esteem.
Yeah, self-esteem and things. There's a quote, again, I'm quoting WoW because WoW.
Because WoW has a bazillion characters
It has
to
a
pull
bazillion
from.
characters and a bazillion things. But in the Burdens of Shao Hao, which is a series of videos that Blizzard released during Mist of Pandaria, in Mist of Pandaria there were the Sha, and there's these evil spirits that inhabit different kinds of flaws, like anger, hatred, and all these things. So like that was the entire idea of the expansion, was dealing with how you deal with negative emotions. And when the quote is, "Pride is the most insidious of Sha. It is good until it is bad, and then it's the worst of all." Because a good and healthy amount of pride can help you. It can be very good for you, and you can feel like you have accomplished something, and that you're worth continuing to work on things.
Yeah, like real life example, like artists learning to value their own work.
Exactly. But eventually,
You really have to hit home.
eventually,
I mean, I'm
if you
self-frozen,
get
too.
too much pride, then it becomes the most one of the most terrible flaws you can have, because every other flaw can derive from pride.
Yeah.
And so if you are the most prideful person, then you are probably also extremely stubborn, and you're extremely hot-headed.
I bet we could link pride to all the other 7 deadly sins. So like
That's
pride,
true.
let's see, pride and lust, you think you're so great you can land any person you want.
Yep.
True.
Let's see, sloth, you think you're so great you don't have to lift a finger.
Yeah.
Let's see, wrath, you're so prideful that anything that challenges you, you just go off the handle.
Yeah.
Gluttony, you have self-pride.
You deserve
You
this.
deserve it. You
I deserve
to
all of this.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Like greed, same
Same thing,
You,
agreed.
you think you deserve it.
Yeah.
Envy. So pride, yeah, that can you're so prideful, but if you think something might be better, you're
Yeah.
gonna start trying to tear them down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Back to the I deserve
was
this more than
spicy.
you do.
Yeah. Well, we just got real spicy.
There we go. Wow. Yeah. So pride. It is one of the easiest ones to write because it just has so much you can pull from.
Yeah.
So yeah, use it.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's interesting you point out the lack of pride thing too, because I think that could also be a potentially good flaw, is because you're always second guessing yourself and you're always hesitating that you never make a decision.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh,
that
and
you say that.
maybe that can also play into the lack of pride in other people, where it's like, wait, and then they hesitate, and then you cause other people to hesitate. Ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, that could be a
There we
good one.
go. Very interesting.
Okay, now let's do one last flaw, easy to write flaw.
All right. So an easy to write flaw, in my opinion, that has a lot of potential to be extremely complex as you move on with it, is naivety or inexperience. And it's, again, it can be either minor or major depending on what you want the character to be kind of going through, like how much knowledge they already have. The flaw is able to fluctuate really easily with story progression, and can be a tool for the storytelling. Oftentimes, naivety can manifest as trust in others with little reason for it. You just trust them because, they seem like nice people.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just trust them. It could be as simple as believing whatever someone says, or following an order because someone, above you told you to do it. Even without questioning it, you just are like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense to me. I'm not the one in charge. I don't have the experience for this. Naive characters can seem passive. They'll check with others before making their own decisions. Or they might be active, doing what they think is right without thinking of any consequences because, I don't know, it's what I want to do.
I played a character kind of like that. She was a druid. And socially, she was kind of stupid because she was raised by birds.
Was it Dove?
It was Dove.
Nice. Oh, amazing.
Dove is my idiot druid. Haven't played her in a while, but she started out very naive and very trusting because she thought, well, I'm nice. Everyone else must be pretty nice. Why isn't everyone good? And so that's something that she's had to kind of grow up from.
Right.
Oh, poor baby.
I feel like she doesn't have rose-tinted glasses anymore, so to speak. Those have cracked. But I don't know. She still maintains sort of her optimism and hope. But the point is, she's having to grow out her inexperience and her naivety.
Exactly. Yeah, so that kind of naivety and everything, it can be a catalyst to conflict and things. The origins for this flaw can be really simple. They're young. A child will oftentimes be much more naive than an adult, but even adults can be naive. They may just not exactly know how complex their world is. They could have been raised in isolation. They could have lived out in the woods, been raised by birds.
Did you live under a rock?
Yeah, did you live under a rock? Exactly. They don't understand how complex things are or how people might act differently than themselves. The origin could just be that they're out of their element, the fish out of water trope, especially found in anime, the isekai anime, where it's like, oh, you're suddenly in another world and you have to figure out how this world works. It's like, recently, I haven't watched it yet, but it's on my radar, is the time I got reincarnated as a slime.
I keep hearing about that.
And it sounds hilarious, but yeah, it's the guy.
Oh, is that the one with the cute goblins?
Yes,
I don't
it
know.
does have cute goblins.
Yeah.
But the guy dies and is now a slime, and it's like
Because anime.
Because anime.
Yeah.
They're like, how does he know anything about the world? I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have the exact flaw of the inexperience or naivety, but it does kind of show up here and there.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like I said, these characters with this flaw, they'll just believe what they're told or just seem clueless due to not having anyone else to turn to. As a minor flaw, the character could be disrespected or disregarded by others just as they're kind of childish. They have all these idealistic thoughts as like, oh yeah, I'm really optimistic and we can do this, rose-tinted glasses thing. It's like, actually, no. The world is more complex than that. So people might treat them as though they're children, even if they're grown adults.
Why don't we just talk to the ogre?
Yeah, that kind of Connie from Steven Universe kind of had that. Like, she literally had rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
And then, like, after she heard, when Steven healed her eyes, she also heard about how Amethyst almost died because she got cracked because she fell off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, like, at the end of the episode, Connie takes off the glass and she pops out the lenses. So that was kind of a symbolic, like, okay, I get that the world is actually more dangerous than I thought.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Wow. Rebecca Sugar.
Yeah. Sugar woman.
But yeah,
lady.
Another thing that with the minor flaws is they could just be easily duped. They could there could be a pickpocket that plays the old, oh, I'm gonna show you a magic trick thing, and their friend pickpockets them.
Yeah.
Con artists and stuff could easily get naive or inexperienced characters. Overall, they just kind of struggle to develop themselves in their own world. They are just kind of too codependent on others to figure out what is supposed to happen for a minor flaw. As a major flaw, it could just be that they are so codependent or so unable to kind of understand what's going on that they'll just believe literally anything anyone says. They'll become a lackey to someone. They won't make decisions for themselves, or they'll foolishly make decisions based entirely on no knowledge at all. Mm-hmm. They could end up being tricked into thinking they're doing the right thing while actually furthering a villain's cause. A good example of that is an anime that I also haven't watched yet, but is on the list. It's called Recreators, and has a colon between re and creators.
Right.
And in that anime, it's all these different anime protagonists and video game protagonists are brought into the real world, and they meet their creators.
Oh.
And
that's real spicy.
It is really interesting, and hence why I want to watch it. But a group of them hate their creators and want to destroy them or force them to change the world so that it's different. And one of the characters is a magical girl, and she's extremely naive because in her world everything is black and white. It's because it's just it's for kids. That's what the anime that she's from is for. And she meets up with this military commander type from a very hardcore anime.
It's Fix It Felix
game or something.
Calhoun.
Yeah, exactly. And so the commander is one of the antagonists. She's wants to destroy the creators or wants to get them to rewrite their world, and so the magical girl's like, oh, okay, I'll follow you. You're obviously a good person because you're in the military, and that's because she that from her world that's how it is. And so she also doesn't understand that her power in this universe has actual consequences as she's blowing things up with her magical spells, and she's like, oh, people what is happening when people die? Like, she doesn't understand death. And so, like, she's very naive and just follows this person all the way through a certain point.
Wow.
I don't exactly know where it goes because I haven't watched it yet, but from the synopsis, it's really interesting.
That's a lot of, that's good potential. I mean, making it a major flaw, the thing about all these flaws is it forces the character to either change or really, really suffer, you know?
Yeah.
Just like, you know, what you said with the whole naivety thing. Like, if she doesn't change, she's gonna hurt a lot of people.
Yep.
You know, with cowardice, again, if they don't change, they're gonna hurt a lot of people. You know, that's how you know that it's a good major flaw, is if you put them in a really tough situation where if they don't change their ways, a lot of bad things are gonna happen. And that's an interesting story, you know, because that, you know, just like listening to you guys make these examples, I'm like, oh, I wanna figure out how that story goes, you know. I wanna see, do they become a better person? Do they just follow their own, you know, route that they're going? And that I think is why flaws are so important to write for your characters, because it just makes them more interesting and more intriguing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, just don't, if you want to write about the environment instead and just go all J.R.R. Tolkien and just spend 5 paragraphs describing the mountains.
I mean, they're very nice mountains.
They are very nice
I love
mountains.
those mountains. I love every detail of those mountains, but
Yeah.
Or in A Christmas Carol, where they like spend 2 whole pages describing what's on a feast table.
Yeah, well, you have to know about the cranberry
I
sauce.
absolutely do not.
And the turkey and the I don't know, the rolls that are.
It would have been real funny if there were AR questions based off what was in the feast.
Yes, accelerated reading.
Flaws are important in the sense that they're very simple and basic, but, you know, simple and basic are, you know, the building blocks, the foundations of a good story. You know, there's a reason why we follow these rules, because, you know, and why these rules have stuck around for so long, because they work, you know? Writing flaws should be such a simple, basic, you know, 101 thing to write for a character, because they work. Yeah, we need flaws, because flaws make us human. Even the Dracula himself from the newest Castlevania series has flaws, and he's a freaking vampire. I hope you learned a few things from this. You get out there, write your characters' flaws, make them stumble and break things, hurt people, make them destroy buildings.
Make them suffer.
Make them suffer. Make them be in a tough spot, and everybody hates them.
Joseph, say something intimidating in your sick, deep voice. Get real close to the mic.
It's a wonderful day outside. Birds are singing.
It's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day outside. Birds are chirping. Birds are singing. Flowers are blooming. On days like these, kids like you should give me a kiss. Come here.
Thanks for listening. Hope it was helpful.
I look forward to hearing all of your comments. Bye.